Everybody, I appreciate you sitting in on this one, and it is somewhat jokingly, but I mean, I am being very serious. If you had an opportunity to see my wife, my better half, also known as my general manager, Mary Kate, she presented yesterday. So we do have a little bit of battle going on. If we can kind of fill these seats in, go ahead and grab them, buy the backpacks, bring them on in. If you are sitting in the back, I am going to ask, just kind of slide up. I'm not going to call on you, but there's going to be a lot of charts up here, and I'm very conscious of kind of what it looks like when you're about 30 rows behind. If you can't see it, I am going to ask you to come up, okay? Number two, if you've got a degree in exercise science, raise your hands proudly. Raise them up. Very good. You all can leave right now. You don't need this stuff. If you are new to the field, you came from business, marketing, you had a midlife crisis, decided to buy a Harley or a Corvette like my parents when they got divorced, raise your hands. Shout out to all of you for getting better and making those changes, okay? This talk might be more for you if you don't come from a formal education in exercise science. So I just wanted to preset the notion and objectives for today, because we're going to be talking a lot about what I cover in my classes at Springfield College. We're going to be talking about overload. I'm going to be reviewing a lot of different methods, and to some of you, they may seem advanced. Some of you may think, hey, I learned this in my undergrad. Maybe it was from a school like Springfield College or whatnot. But I just want to lay it out on the line. If you decide, hey, this stuff's a little too bit basic, that's okay. But as we evolve in our field, I am 100% understanding of not everybody has the same path. And I'll briefly talk about my path. Not everybody breaks their arm when they're 18 years old and you're hanging out with the athletic trainer and realizing, well, I can be a strength conditioning coach. So we're going to dive into, we can call it advanced, we can call them methods, we can call them styles of training. But what I want to present to you are a lot of the different ways and opportunities that you can help your athletes, your Gen Pop clients, yourselves on if they have areas of concern where they're not getting stronger, where they're not getting more powerful. So if you're in a facility like MBSC and you've got velocity-based trackers, you're in a facility like somewhere else where you have really fancy cameras and you're looking at kinematics and kinetics and all these types of things, cool. But if you're working with kids like I do, and I'm a co-owner of TFP out in Wilbraham, Mass, and Chris and I were joking a little bit about, is it really Western Mass? It's really not. He calls it Central Mass. You know, you get out towards Pittsfield, then you realize you made a bad decision, right? So then you just kind of turn around, right? Western Mass, born and bred. But when you have these opportunities to work with kids, right? We just wrapped up our summer program yesterday, almost 200 kids. We have a thriving adult program. You might hear about it. We call ourselves the Rad Dads. We got Bomb Moms. You know, we've got almost 60 members doing that. I'm presenting everything in the strategies that I teach in the classroom, as well as what we use in our facility. And it's not a big facility, all right? It's less than 2,000 square feet, but we make a big impact in our community. What I want to drive home is the biggest premise right here. Stop just writing programs that say light, medium, heavy. Stop writing programs that just say 3 sets of 5. Stop writing programs that say lift as fast as possible, lift as hard as possible. I'm going to take you back to some of the science, and I'm going to challenge your thought process into understanding, how do you know if this is challenging enough? When do you need to know when you're putting down the gas pedal? When do you need to know when you need to hit the brakes? And when you're working with high-performing athletes, whether it's college groups, professionals, or that Gen Pop that is getting ready for that High Rocks event, like I got a couple in my facility, how do we manage the structure and planning of training accordingly so that when they peak at the very moment that you've been preparing for, they're ready to go, okay? So we got a lot to cover. I purposely try to make this as long as possible, and I asked Chris for Q&As and stuff, no disregard, no shade to the other presenters in the next block. If you want to chat with me, I'm going to be in the QA room, all right? So we can talk about all these strategies. If you want to know what's going on, the slides are up there. I am not a mass marketer. I don't really understand sales too well. I'm not going to pitch you anything at the end of the day, but if you want access to the slides right now, if you're not on the app, grab that QR code. There is going to be a whole mess of other methods that we're going to briefly touch on, but that can really help enhance that strength and power. So I'll talk a little bit about triphasic today, very popular concept, very fortunate to know guys like Cal Dietz and Mike Nelson. But what I've given you are class resources that I use in my programs at school, spreadsheets on spreadsheets, automatic calculators. You'll see a little bit right there. But again, all free, all for that. No mailing lists, all right? I'm not going to send you a little, thank you gift insider info for an upsell of $99, all right? None of that's there, okay? We're here to get better. We're here to learn. Same thing goes for me. If you want to connect with me, my personal Instagram is AE Feit. Our business is Train with TFP. Check us out, tag us. There's a lot of people that can't be here this weekend, including my staff, because they're all gone. All right, my wife couldn't be here because we're back into preseason. You see something, share it with everybody. Social media is an incredible thing. It helps you as a person representing the brand. It helps your network, but it also helps the generic industry of making sure that people have other ideas and other opportunities to learn. So if you have a client that has plateaued, has anybody ever worked with somebody that no matter what you're doing, they're just not getting any stronger, okay? Yeah, I just turned 40 last week. God help us all, okay? I am holding on to everything I can do. I'm not as strong as I once was, but as the country song goes, I'm as good once as I ever was. And then all of a sudden you see that, oh, this is going to be a really heavy day. And I'm just thinking, oh, maybe today's not today. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow, right? But we're going to talk about some methods. Instead of just writing 3 sets of 5, instead of writing a hypertrophy block for 3 sets of 10, what are some other ways we can organize and structure our sets if you have a client that no matter what you do in traditional training, the bar ain't budging, all right? Maybe you have a client over here that, especially if you're working with adults like I do, if they are not sore, hurt, or they threw up, it's a bad workout. Do you agree? I get that all the time. Adults, we are the savviest, wackiest savages out there. As a performance coach, it's really hard to instill the values of recovery and understanding that you don't have to go ham all the time, right? But you're going to have clients like this that if you don't structure the workout accordingly, or you take care of what I call the peak end rule, if they don't feel it in those last couple moments, they think they're wasting their money. And then you may have run into guys like Bobby. I don't know if you've seen Bobby in the bargain basement down there. He had a good time at the social. Bobby's my guy and performed better. Please check up on him later, okay? He's running the whole bargain basement downstairs. Then you got some athletes, you got some clients that, you know what? It's like hangover 4. They miss, or they show up a little bit late, and you can kind of see them all disheveled. They're wrestling around with the Tiger and Mike Tyson and whatnot, right? And they're like, I'm just here for the community, right? I love it. But you signed up for results. And as a coach, and as your coach, I want to make sure that we deliver on those results. So no matter what type of client you're working with, are you in a position where your kids aren't getting faster, you're not getting enhanced mobility or flexibility with your adults, or if you're looking at your attendance like we do, hey, where's Joe been? All right, where's Susie been? It's been a while. What's going on there? And if they are dissatisfied with their progress, how can I make the most of it and move forward? So we've all heard this, right? Keep it simple, stupid. If you shorten that down, what do they teach you in school for all my exercise science people? What does that stand for? KISS, right? Every lecture you go to, and this is my mission, all right, is to challenge that simple will work until it doesn't. I went back to school for sport and exercise psychology. I do a lot of work in performance psychology consulting, pro teams, and working around with a lot of Division I institutions. And when I look at their programs, because I have the nuance factor of being not just a physical coach, but also a performance coach, I'm looking at their programming and I'm thinking, why is this so simple? Simple works, but eventually it won't. External motivation, peer pressure. We've all been victims of peer pressure. Would you agree? Yeah, it works pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah. And then it doesn't. And so I want you to think again about, reflect on your programming, all right? And my wife, Mary Kate, talked a little bit about this in terms of individualizing your group opportunities. Good training is good. But when's the last time you challenge yourself, how can I turn this good into great? And how can I turn my good into better and my better into all time? So instead of just relying on what I learned in my internship, maybe it's at a facility like ours, maybe it's at a facility where it was near your school, or maybe you just started to shadow and understand what the observations were. Hey, we're getting good results. That's great. But you also have to understand, are you willing to settle for what's good? And if you don't explore the corners, and this is not a common belief, and I kind of rub some elbows a little bit, this kind of goes against the grain. How many of us have heard of the idea of minimal effective dose? Raise your hands, okay? In an ideal world, we give the minimal effective dose. Because if it works, and we understand the difference between medicine and poison is simply the dosage. If I'm with an in-season athlete, or if I'm working with a 45-year-old going through a life transition with career or divorce, whatever the case may be, that 5:30 a.m. session is going to be minimally effective. But if all you settle for is minimally effective dose, how do you know what their maximal effective dose is? How do you know what they can handle in terms of stress tolerance, in terms of load capacity, in terms of, that's pretty good, that's pretty fast, but what if we added a little bit more? What if I had higher standards for my students? At Springfield College, where I'm now the program director of exercise science, I have this giant quote in my office, and it says, high standards plus high levels of support equals high chances of success. I expect a lot out of my students. I expect a lot out of my attendees. I expect a lot out of the people that walk through my doors at 5:30 in the morning or 5:30 at night. But I can't just keep things so simple because that's a disservice to your clients. Think about other ways that you can challenge them. I'm not telling you to put more weight on the bar, but I'm telling you to think about how can I change this to keep them interested? So instead of keeping it simple, stupid, I want you to keep it simple and spicy, right? We know the laws of training. We need progressive overload, right? We understand reversibility. If you don't use it, what happens to it? You what? You lose it, right? We get all this type of stuff. But we also cannot neglect the factor of motivation in the psychology of training. And that's where a lot of my research intersects of how can I blend in the training of the 6 inches between the ears, and how, if I've lost the client, was it really because it was a 5:30 a.m. session? Was it really because I didn't change the program enough? Instead of saying, you know what, I have to do 4-week programs, I have to do 6-week programs, I have to have enough overload, which me as an exercise science professor, I get it, I understand it. If I change it too much, you don't adapt. If you don't adapt, you don't get better. If you don't get better, we're just getting worse. But there's value in changing how you're doing your programming. There's value in the way you progress your loads because of the psychology factor. And that's where we're going to kick off right here. So what I want you to leave here is I want you to think about, how can I be a habituation disruptor? In fancy terms, how can I distort what is the norm and then create a new norm for my clients? So when I look at the research, right, habituation is a process of which repeated exposure to stimulus leads to a decrease in response. In exercise science terms, this is simply the law of accommodation. This is why when you work with anybody, hell, if you just look at the barbell, you got stronger, right? As we get older, we realize we look at carbs and we get fatter. That just happens, okay? It's not based in science. It's okay. It's real. But if I'm doing the same thing all the time, if I'm doing the same warm-up all the time, if I'm writing the same strength program all the time, it'll work until it won't. I want you to reflect if you're here. How many of you brought your staff with you or you're with a bunch of team members? Raise your hands up proudly. Nice job, okay? Audit your program. Did you just copy and paste your warm-up from last summer? Did you just go to another hands-on application and just did what they did? Look at how the results that you're getting, how far are they taking you? And you know what? One of the best things you can do, watch your athletes and clients warm up. If they're chatting, if they're having a good time, chances are we're in a good space. The moment they stop chatting, the moment they stop talking, the moment they just look like they're extras for The Walking Dead, we realize, you know what? I think we're adapting here. So we've got to disrupt that. Now, you can't do it too much, right? There's a methodology of training. I don't think licensed, I'm legally allowed to say it, but it rhymes with something like schmosmit, okay? Where if you change it too much, how do you know you're getting better? If I just move the equipment around just a little bit different, if I know my workout of the day, if I know what's happening here, if I just move the erg a little bit closer, I move the Rogue Echo a little bit closer, I'm going to do a better time. But again, you have to have enough simulation there to progress. But are you not progressing enough? Okay? So we know that clients might stop listening, they're going to stop improving, or they're just going to go through the motions. And I can see it. I work with everybody from 3rd grade and up, okay? Ideally, I wanted to start with high performance high school and college. Then I had kids. And then my kids wanted to train. This is awesome. Then my kids had friends. And of course, in the dad in me, I'm like, this is awesome. But in the business owner, I was like, this is awesome, right? So now I can bring in their kids and their friends and their clubs and partnerships. But they're not just lazy. When your clients aren't making improvements, really what it's called is a neurological efficiency. So as we look at this, I want you to think about today, and I'm going to take you through kind of like our college performance program a little bit this afternoon, is how can you just repackage what you're doing? Changing the tempos, adding putting a percentage on a card. I get it. 1RMs are not feasible for everybody. 100% agree. How can you in your programming think, whether you're using velocity-based trackers or you're just watching the barbell and thinking you really know what an RPE of 7 is? And when I talk to my students when they write their programs, and I'm like, well, I'm going to do a light, medium, heavy. And I'm like, but what is light? What is that being anchored to? Or if I'm watching somebody and I'm like, yeah, you know, they're writing programs and they got an RPE of 7, and I'm thinking, oh, you think you only have 3 reps left? They're like, yeah. And I was like, you probably had about 9. And they're just baffled. No way. I said, yeah, because I've been coaching 20 years. And when I look at bar speed movement, I know what that really is. So we do a day in our lab, in our strength room that just got updated by Perform Better. Shout out to all of them for helping us out with that, where we're going to talk about RPE. We're going to talk about RIR. And if you're going to write an RIR, or reps in reserve, of 1, we're going to take you there. You may not like me, but I don't go into teacher mode. I'm in coach mode. And I'm going to make sure you only have 1 rep left. So if you don't have that lived experience, what are we writing our programs based off of? Okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about some evidence-based training. A caveat here, and Brandon just talked about this. If we rely too much on evidence, it's taken too long. Folks, I just published my first author research article, The Use of Psychological Skills in Collegiate Strength Conditioning. I'm fired up. It's free. Send me a link. I'll send it to you. You know when I did that study? 5 years ago. Things happen. Life happens. I hate research writing. Took me a while. So when I'm talking with people about what did you find, how is this going to be applied, I said, you know what? 5 years ago, I would have had a really great answer for you. Now I got to write a whole nother paper because research takes time. But before we rest on evidence-based practice, this is where I challenge all of you as coaches. Rely on practice-based evidence. This is where you are guinea pigs. This is where you are experimenting. The research is not going to catch up to you in time. It is hard to do research. You have things like review boards. You have things like bias. You have things like sampling. And let's be honest, when you look at a lot of the research in health and fitness, does anybody know the population that it's usually based off of? Older adults, or what's the other one? Athletes. Resistance-trained white males between the ages of 18 and 22. Why? Because when you meet with resistance-trained white males between the ages of 21, they like to lift what? Weights. Sign up for my study. Get a Chipotle card. Winning. That's all it takes. Literally, I talk to my students. You want to do research? Just build in a Chipotle gift card line. It's going to work every time. Okay? So you can't just rely on the evidence, but I'm going to show you a couple strategies we can do so. Practical programming, actionable coaching tips, and then advanced tools. Okay? So quick background. I said it a little bit earlier. My amazing family right there, Mary Kate, you may have heard her yesterday. We've got 2 amazing kids, Cody and Macy. I will say this, my son is awesome. He's on the Ultra Classic Premier Elite Executive Travel Soccer Team. Big deal, right? He actually is pretty good. We actually went to regionals and nationals, and it's been crazy. But it's just awesome watching him develop, right? My daughter, she's built more like me, like a 3 technique, so we're going to develop her, because who knows what sport. She's in basketball right now. But we love what we do what we love. So in between, now the program director at Springfield College, Exercise Science. There I teach strength conditioning undergrad. I teach advanced strength conditioning graduate. I've done sports nutrition. I help out in our sports psychology department, but I'm living it as a business owner. So when I'm not teaching, I'm coaching in the morning or I'm coaching at night. And this is the lens that I'm going to give you what I'm looking through. I've coached everywhere. I've consulted everywhere. This is not a flex. This is just to let you know I'm not a guy they picked up on Route 146. Been very, very fortunate. I started at Springfield as an undergrad. I've climbed my way through the ranks in Division I. I had a couple coffees in the NFL, realized this is not where I want to be. Went back into the private, started the private sector, had a thriving 16,000 square foot facility with my partner, Bobby Smith, who's also been a presenter over a number of years. Springfield College calls my wife and I back, says, hey, this is a package. The program's changing. People might be retiring. Would you like to come back to school? Maybe you can teach here someday and take over the program. And I was like, yeah, great package. Like, what's it pay? Well, that's a great question, and it worked, right? So Mary Kate's now the grad program coordinator. I'm the undergrad program. It all worked. But within all of those lenses, I've been able to talk on things like this. And a lot of my work is in sports psychology with people, right? Lastly, I just came back from the Detroit Lions. Awesome stuff there. But this is the stuff that we're talking about. How do I bridge the gap between better programming and better results? So let's dive in, okay? When you work with a novice, it could be Gen Pop. It could be your soccer parent. It could be your stay-at-home parent. It could be the quote-unquote rad dad that wants to look, feel, and move better for his kids someday. Or it could be that ultra-classic executive premium silver level soccer player. Anything we do will work. You agree? Okay. I liken this to the analogy of when you get a nice new bottle of toothpaste, all right? A nice new tube. Now, if you're a parent, how many parents in the room like me, you realize that all that toothpaste is where now? Everywhere, right? I look at where where the sink is, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. How did it get up there, right? You sit on the toilet. What's going on? Well, we have to have these conversations of what's happening here. When you're working with newer clients, all you have to do, just like a new tube of toothpaste, you push it anywhere, it works. 3 sets of 5, 4 sets of 2, right? 5 heavy sled pushes, call it a day. The more advanced you get, the higher level training ages you get, now you're like a strapped college student because you have no more money for toothpaste. You are pushing strategically in every corner and crevice. And that's what you got to do with some of your clients. Some of your clients pay you lots of money to get them results. And are you still writing X times Y and A plus B? So when we look at the methods, and I'm going to go from very simple to more advanced stuff as you stay with me for the rest of the hour. Think about, where are your levers? Where are the quickest things that you can pull? Your newer athletes, your younger athletes, hey, run them for 6 weeks at a time, right? Add a little bit more weight, progressive overload, it works. Your older athletes, science has shown and evidence-based practice has shown they need more variation. We need to disrupt homeostasis more often. Coming back from a visit in the NFL, I'm realizing how much of this programming is very individualized, but it's also very sequential. So if we're going to write blocks of this focus and this focus and this focus, you might need to do that for high level, right? If you're running a metabolic type of workout or a strength day and a metabolic day, great. You can kind of mash everything together like a Sunday leftover soup, throw it in the crock pot. Everything works until it doesn't. So what area of your toothpaste tube are you going to be pressing after today? When we get into specificity, and I don't mean this slide to get too busy, when I work with my grad students at Springfield, so preseason just started this week, we've got almost 700 student athletes. All the sport coaches want to make sure that the training is sport specific. If you have been in this field and you're getting better in this field, you realize that as coaches and as trainers, we're the general coaches. We're training biomotor qualities like strength and size and speed and power, momentum, impulse, all of these qualities essentially to help them become better at their sport. And as you get more advanced, or you have that client that sets up for a sparring, you have a client that wants to do high rocks, you have a client that runs a run set 5K, let's go back to basics, specific adaptations to impose demands. But when you got somebody that is paying you a lot of money and they're putting a lot of investment into you, are you matching what we call the laws of dynamic correspondence? So out of the Eastern Bloc literature, Brandon talked about this. This comes out of one of the world famous sports scientists, Verkhoshansky. All right, 6 main categories. You don't have to do this all the time, but if you have a nice little peaking block 2 to 4 weeks before you send them away for preseason, or 2 to 4 weeks before they do that big event, does your training match what they're going to see in competition? All my interns come back, I'm looking at their summer programming, and I'm thinking, I can't believe we're still running half-gassers, which is halfway down the field and back. I can't believe we're still running 110 yards down the field when you're working with a very, what we call alactic aerobic sport, where you push a sled for 5 yards as a lineman, and then you got 35 seconds off. We're not matching the demands of the sport. No wonder when we get to preseason, day 7 through 14 are the highest risk of injury. Because me, as a performance coach, did not prepare you for the demands. So, very briefly, are you matching amplitude and direction of movement? Do they mimic joint angles, range of motion, movement patterns, etc.? Look, I've powerlifted, I've strongman competed, I've been an Olympic lifter. I'm not going to have the argument on where a squat should be a squat. All I know is this, everybody squats differently. Would you agree? Right? As I get closer to sport, you might want to look at things like sport squats that Cal Dietz talks about. You might want to look at joint angles to saying, do I really need to load 500 in the hole all the way down? And I know you're impressed, but they're flex fit. That's what happens, okay? You got to be prepared at all times. Always be 5-way stretch. Don't know where the 5th way is, but we'll find out later. Amplitude and direction of movement. Look at the movement patterns. All my students doing needs analysis. Are you doing a client analysis? What do they want to do? What can they do? How can I help them to do that better and quicker? Number 2, accentuation of force. The point where they produce force, does it correspond to the force that when they're actually playing? So if we're doing lockout bench work, am I really going to be applying 405 in a partial range of motion? Because we know as the weight gets heavier, what happens to the speed? But in football, boom, that's going to be really, really fast. Or if I'm cutting, if I'm doing change of direction, if I'm planting, pushing, and then punching through, how does that match my training? All right, number 3, rate and time. What's the velocity look like? And we've got fancy graphs that we can talk about later at another time, but I'm doing this thing. Does it match the speeds at which I should actually be doing it? The regime, we're going to talk a lot about regime. That's essentially tempo, okay? Step outside of just doing eccentric. Step outside of just doing concentric. How about we just mix them together? How do we find a way to overload the organism or the client, essentially, without adding more weight? Because the older you get, and if you work with older adults, all these things start creeping up. Bone spurs, the Achilles. We had a PT intern who just finished up work with us. He said the number one age range for Achilles tears is not high-level athletes. It's men between the ages of 30 and 50. Men, why? Because we all think we can still play hoops, right? That's what it comes down to. Oh yeah, let's get a lead together. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. But what was great, here's what was great as a teacher. My intern says, now I know why you're always doing low-level plyos with their dads. Now I know why you're always doing pogos and boxes and hurdle jumps. And we're doing some crazy stuff, right? Because once you use it, you lose it. So if I'm going to maintain, as Tom Brady's trainer would call pliability, I got to keep doing that. But you got to make sure that we're matching it accordingly. And then magnitude and direction of movement force. You want to write great programs, understand the science behind that, okay? So let's talk methods. How many of you have done 5-3-1 ever in your programs? All right, not as many as I thought. I'm just curious, how do we do it? Do we do a week of 5s? Maybe a week of 3s? MBSC, what's up, guys? Talk to me. You guys have used them over the years. I've been stalking you on Instagram. All right, week of 5s. What happens in the next week? Go down to 3s. Stay with me here. What comes after 3? 1, okay. Now, are we doing it kind of just based off feel? Are we putting percentages on it?
And it's just like based off feel, start, progress, complete, like visual.
Yeah, right. Very simple. So we're looking at basic strength development. This comes out of Jim Wendler, very strong power lifter way back in the day. We do variations of 5-3-1, but this is how you really do 5-3-1. And these are the conversations I have with my students. You did a couple weeks of 5s. You did a couple weeks of 3s. You did a couple weeks of 1s. Actually, no. Okay, so there's a lot of things that look like, all right? 4-week cycles. Now we're thinking big stuff right here. 3 sets of 5. Can it be any sets of 3 sets of 5? Can it be a light set, a medium set? Is it 3 hard sets? When you get to the highest levels, you got to ask these questions. And when they come in after practice or they come in at 5:30 in the morning, what is this 5 going to look like? So 3 sets of 5, 3 by 3, and then you do it typically 5-3-1. Your 4th week, you take a reload. What does it look like in practice? Here we go. If you scan the QR code at the beginning, you'll get this. You'll also have it at the end. Let's take a look, and this is why I asked you if you can come up a little bit. If I can get some sort of estimation on it, just like heart rate, all right, 1RMing your new client, not a great idea, especially if they've never trained before, okay? While my cousin is my lawyer, I really try to just see her around the holidays. I don't want any other issues with that. So as a business owner, you got to be real careful. We'll talk about estimations there. You've actually got 2 methods. On the top method up here, that's what I call ascending sets. You're essentially taking 10% jumps in between. That can work really well for some clients. Some of your clients, and most of them, they might be between about 5 and 10, okay? Obviously, the bigger the lifts, the bigger the jumps. But if I'm doing 5-3-1, I'm gonna ask you, are you? Really? Week 1, 65 for 5, that's really light. 75 for 5, that's a little bit harder. 85 for 5, we can stop there, or a plus set, or what I call a money set, and then we go for it. And then I just track it, okay? This is why it's important. Even though the reps and sets and the standardization of what I can do can change, we've got to go back to the basics. So let's do some quick math. My 100% of load, what repetition max is that? Let's start off real easy. 1, okay? What is 80%? If I have 80% on the bar, how many reps theoretically could I do? Anybody know? Say it with me a little bit louder. Wait. Around 8. Yeah. How about 75%? About 10 to 12. And if we don't have this concrete backing of science and the fancy chart that the industry publishers send us, none of this will make sense, right? And it doesn't work with everybody. But I have found time and time again, this is why now, if you're not programming in ranges, you should. When you put 90% on the bar, theoretically, science will tell us, depending on their muscle fiber typology, when I'm fresh and ready to go, I can probably do about 4. Some kids can only do 1. That's why we do clusters. We'll talk about that. Some kids might be able to do 5 or 6. When I write programs, I care more about how they feel and how they target that set. If I say 4 and they get 2, do they feel like they won? No. So I'm always giving a range. This comes out of the framework autonomy-supportive coaching, which I talk a lot about. Give them options. If I want 4, but I'm good with 2, they may only give me 2. This is how we auto-regulate, okay? So week 1, sets of 5, open set. Week 2, sets of 3. So we're right there. Week 3, we're going for it. And then I take a deload week right there. But again, we're doing an RPE, rate of perceived exertion. 9 means it's pretty tough. I could probably squeeze out just maybe a couple more reps. That's it, right? Once you log in, you got the QR code at the end. This is all in Excel for you. All you have to do is change numbers right here. So let's say that's upper body, lower body. All this will spit out accordingly. You can copy and paste it as needed, okay? So when we look at 5-3-1, your 5s might be too light. Again, I asked earlier, how much is about 80%? Some people said 3, some people said 12. But each person's going to be uniquely different. And that's why at like our grad level, we do things like force velocity profiles and strength profiles, because you have some people that are very strength dominant. They can push a lot of weight, but it's moving real slow. And you have some people that are very elastic dominant, where they're not very strong, but man, they can be quick off that ground, okay? So method number 1, 5-3-1. You repeat, rinse, and recycle. You track their weights. This is a great way with your clients to show progress. If I'm using 90-95% of my max, 270, I might be able to do 10 reps because it's really not 85%. But then on the next program in 4 more weeks, I do 270 for a lot more reps. Bingo, got them hooked. They're getting stronger, okay? Use psychology to your advantage. How about the Juggernaut method? Anybody used the Juggernaut method before? Drew, big fan of Juggernaut. All right, my man. Juggernaut comes from Chad Wesley Smith with Juggernaut Training Systems. Again, high-level powerlifter. I am not a powerlifter by trade, but we can't neglect where our roots came from. Lifting heavy weight, finding ways to move it a little bit better. So in the Juggernaut system, very simple. We got 4-week cycles. In fancy science terms, we have things called accumulation, intensification, and realization. You can actually just kind of throw in like hypertrophy, strength, and power. When we talk about block periodization, again, another type of concept, really, we're just doing a lot of work. We're doing a little bit less work, higher intensity. We're doing a little bit less work, but even higher intensity. Very simple. You never train with your competition max. Remember this. If you're on a platform, Olympic lifting, powerlifting, strongman, whatever it is, you've got everything rolling. Endorphins, all right, adrenaline, epinephrine, 16 monsters, right? You're in it, okay? You're going to hit a PR or a PB that you won't be able to match in training. There's been a lot of research talking about when we hit our heavier weights, we should treat them like a normal set. If I get all this energy to get ramped up, it's going to take a lot of that energy to ramp back down. And when you're constantly flipping the switch up and down with your athletes and clients, that adds a toll. All right, Brandon talked about earlier, sympathetic and parasympathetic when we're talking about overtraining syndromes, okay? So same thing, about 4-week cycles here. Now, what's great about Juggernaut, again, you'll have copies of all this, very progressive, all right? A month of 10s, a month of 8s, a month of 5s, a month of 3s, and so forth. Lots of volume, very doable though. How do I know it's doable? Because I know through experience, I should be able to do 75% for about 10 times. 60% is relatively lighter than that. I don't have the chart in there, but I've followed a lot of what's called relative intensity, and that really helps you. We put color codes on it. Send me an email or a message on DM, and I'll send that to you, right? How do I know this is hard? Because it's in the red. How do I know this is easy? Because it's in the green. And when you have a color code chart in front of you, no lie, like I just left Detroit this week. Their GPS reports, guess what? Color codes. Because football coaches can't think unless there's a red, yellow, or green. It works. If your clients don't understand, today's red. I looked at the practice schedule. All right, Coach Adam, we got a red day today. And I'm like, let me guess, high intensity? How did you know? I don't know, just lucky guess, right? Just so I've been seeing a lot. Red probably means we got to be very careful, right? Yellow, slow down. Green, let's go for it, okay? So basic linear structure, AMRAPs, very safe and progressive. Take a week off, I go into 8s, right? 5s and 3s. Here's the great reminder about training that I want you all to remember is that to get maximally strong or to get maximally fast, most of your training should be what? Maximal or submaximal? Submaximal, right? If we hop on the track bandwagon, right, and I follow concepts from, legends like Charlie Francis, and they talk about vertical integration, right? They're not running full speed all the time. We shouldn't be lifting as heavy as possible all the time. And when you look at all of your cycling and programming, a lot of it is submaximal. You're always leaving reps left in the tank, especially if you're working with athletes, right? So if you're finishing up a summer program like we were at TFP, right, they're doing work with us. They also got to do field work. Welcome to Division 3. They also have to work landscaping. All right, I worked at Home Depot third shift. I don't wish that upon anybody during the summers. All right, you get stuck in outdoor garden, let's just wait for the night crew. Let's wait for Adam to do it. And that's what I did. All summer, train in the morning, and just had to pick up when you wanted to buy a bag of mulch and realized it was wrong, you just threw it on the ground. Who picked it up? That was me, okay? When you wanted to pick up a bag of concrete and realized there was a rip in it, who picked it up? That was me. You can thank me and tip me later, okay? It's hard. They're managing a lot of stressors, okay? So when you look at all of this stuff, if we quantify max speed as 90% of our PB, and really now when we look at GPS data, it's actually more than like 95. And what's interesting at the highest level, they've got to hit at least 5 yards within 95% of their max speed to reduce the risk of injury. If they don't hit 5 yards of high speed accelerations, all right, they're flagging that on that report. All of this training is sub-maximal. Now, Juggernaut's good. What I don't like about Juggernaut, all the reps and sets. I hate doing, if you're a lifter and you're a meat stick like me, anything over 5 feels like cardio, right? Don't worry, Kevin, it's zone 2, okay? Whatever the case may be, you're like, I just don't want to do a set of 10, right? I'm going to throw some 6 stuff up. My college coaches made me do sets of 20 and all that. Mental toughness, I don't know. I was definitely mentally weak during those sets. Inverted Juggernaut, I actually prefer this method better. Now, I have a subtle tweak on it. But what do we see? And I'll slide back right here. Instead of 5 sets of 10, we simply invert it. You're doing 10 sets of 5. Let's go back to basic physiology, right? How do we put on muscle size? How do we get hypertrophy effects on our muscles? Usually we have to do a lot of what? A lot of reps and a lot of volume. But hopefully we know now, I don't need to do just sets of 10. I don't need to do just sets of 15. I can get that hypertrophy response in sets of 2, 3, 5, 10, and 20. Welcome to training the older athlete. So some older athletes, your clients, they might do better on sets of 10, 15, 20 because the relative load is lower. Some people do better with higher weights because it's less total work that they're doing in terms of rep after rep. So in the inverted model, I want you to consider if you have the time. Now, this is the biggest constraint. It's a lot easier to bang out 5 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10 than it is 10 sets of 5. But when I'm looking at rests, it's very similar. I'm just decreasing my rest. Now I get a little bit more cardiometabolic factor there. Your athletes and clients feel like they're actually getting stronger. And so now you just flip it. I highly recommend it if you're kind of stuck in that 3-set model, that 3-set special. And again, I'm aware of it. We have an hour-long program. I got a 10-minute warm-up. I got 10 minutes of plyos. I got 10 minutes of movement. I have 30 minutes in my weight room. I don't have time for 10 sets with most of my kids. But with my high performers, I said, all right, we're only doing 2 or 3 movements, or we're doing a contrast or complex circuit. We're getting after it, and we're going to do a lot more from the terms of sets over reps. Again, repackage. 50 reps is 50 reps. If the load's heavy enough and it's less volume technically from a rep perspective, I can still get bigger and stronger, okay? So that's inverted Juggernaut. Undulation. We talk about this fancy concept called periodization, which is simply the varying changes of intensities and volumes and rest periods to elicit a certain effect. Many of us have been taught, and I still teach this way to my beginners. Week 1, you do 5 sets of 5 at 100 pounds. Week 2, maybe 5 sets of 5 at 105 pounds, and so forth. It's a stepwise progression. Just like peer pressure, linear periodization works until it what? Doesn't. So when you're working with your clients, think about how you can shake this up and move accordingly. So I'm going to make more variations in my training. I'll show you a couple of graphs, and I'll give you some examples on how we use this with our adults and our kids. But instead of waiting 3 to 4 to 5 weeks of making a drastic change, make the change in either one of 2 ways. One, you have a daily focus. So maybe you have a speed day. Maybe you have a strength day. Maybe you have a size day. Or you make a weekly focus. It breaks up, again, go back to the habituation disruption. If your client looks at their card, and I'm a big card, right? I've used apps, right? I'm not going to name any names because of trademarks and all that stuff. I love the little click on this and do that, but I also like the physical presence of a card. And when you're working with kids, it's an automatic attention grabber. Go to your card, just go. Just stop touching JJ, go. Just go to your card and write down your stuff. And they can track it, right? But adults, hopefully we're smarter than a 10-year-old. It's like, oh, I'm doing the same thing for 3 weeks. They're not juiced about that. They're not excited about that. So again, I might do more microcycles. So what we did in our college program this year, we had an 8-week program. All right, and we're doing essentially 2 4-week programs, but we broke it up into 4 2-week programs. And we just microcycled a little bit. 2 weeks on this, then we're adding a layer. We add a regression, we move a progression, we go from static, stable to reactive, we go from strong to fast, whatever the case may be. So when you look at your coaching, and I'll take a moment here to get you to think, when you're periodizing, varying sets and reps and so forth, what do you really want to happen? If your clients, if the goal is to get stronger, are you writing the right reps and sets and loads to do that? And what happens when you're like me at 24 years old as a head strength coach for the first time, when you write that perfect program, and former college coaches, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is gonna be the greatest program ever. And then all of a sudden you're 3 weeks into it and your coach is like, this ain't working. You're like, but I wrote this like a year and a half ago. This is amazing. My students, they run a program to graduate from our program, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, knowing what you know now, what would you change? You thought you knew the sport, but now you actually did some movement work. You did some linear speed and some multi-directional speed. How would you change your loads? Okay, and I always said, one of my principles is don't write it unless you can't coach it, all right? And don't write it unless you can't, if you can't do it, don't write it. And so these are just little things to think about. But what do you want to happen? But what's probably gonna happen? You're gonna write an awesome Monday program, and then dad and mom have a travel tournament on Sunday, they get back late. Guess what? Heavier deadlifts are out that day. One of the best pivots I ever made in my adult program was doing more of an upper-lower split, and I hate that. I really hate split training because I believe in life is integration and everything from the back of the head to the bottom of the feet. But when you're looking at your adults walking in at 5:30 in the morning, and you got what's on the card, I'm like, you know what? Let's knock the rust off. Athletes, it's the same way. All right, removing all of our max speed work early on in the week and shifting to more of a tempo and recovery and just say, let's knock the rust off, let's grease the groove. The best thing for weekly progressions. So why is your Monday day a strength? Could it be more metabolic recovery? Can you target your Wednesday day to be a little bit more higher intensity? And can Friday be your finisher for the week because you're expecting that they're gonna recover over the weekend? All right, so think about what's happening here. So in a modified undulating model, you got your intensities in red, and then you got your volumes on Friday, right? Inverse relationship here, and this comes out of Cal Dietz's work. But think about your program, your weekly program. If you have themes, right? Is it a metabolic Monday? All right. Is it tough it out Tuesday? Is it wicked Wednesday? I'm just going. Anybody got anything else? What's on Thursday? Thirsty. You would say thirsty. Yeah. Okay. Look by the photos. People are thirsty Thursday night. Right. All right. Friday finish. Sweat it out Saturday. All right. Sync up. Whatever it is. When you're loading, my recommendation, try moving that more towards the middle of the week. You're not overloading the CNS early on. You got people that are traveling, kids as well. Your Monday morning sessions would be more effective if you didn't smash them. But 20 years ago, when I first started coaching, I was like, this has to be, I got to set the tone for the rest of the week. I got to bring it. All right. You want to skip weight. You're not going to skip on a Monday, right? Never skip a Monday. I think Rachel Cosgrove talks about that, right? It's awesome. But then what happens, what I would do, I had high intensity, high volume here, and it completely thrashed all my movement work. So in the summer, for me especially, I move all my heavier lower body towards the end of the week with volume, because summertime, I don't care how much you lift, you got to be able to move well and move often. And so I'll do a lot more movement work early on, and my upper body might be a little bit more higher on Wednesday. And then if I'm on a 3-day model, all right, I'm cranking it up on Friday. So modified undulation. Every day's got a little bit of a focus. So how we can do that here, you have daily undulation, and there's a little, some charts and bullet points to think about, or weekly. Think about, instead of writing your normal 4-week card, right? Well, why do we write 4-week programs? Does anybody know? Where does this come from? What's that? Schedule? Because what happens every 4 weeks? It's a new what? It's a new month, right? We're matching up biorhythms. All right, we're matching, hopefully, menstruation cycles, whatever the case may be. 4 weeks doesn't work for everybody. And that's the hardest thing I have telling my students. I'm like, I know, you did a nice little 4-week hurdle jump progression. I saw Mike Boyle speak. I see him all the time, right? And you can't just go from a stick to a mini bounce to reactive into a reactive to multi-directional. And it's not always going to take 4 weeks. Some kids might be 2 weeks. The best thing we did in our facility, I want you to think about this. If you have people that are learning quickly, write your exercises. And I'll give shout out to Drew, a good friend of mine from Train for Life. Write your exercises in threes. Okay, when we look at the bell curve, within one standard deviation is about 68, 67% of the people. Think about writing your programs in a manner that about most of my clients can do this. But then you have people over here that are non-responders. They need something harder. And then you've got people over here that they don't get it at all. So instead of just writing hex bar deadlift, can you write kettlebell deadlift? Can you write a squat hold? Instead of writing a bench press, is it a bench press with a different tempo or a different push-up progression? So when you're working, especially with general pop, looking at your exercises in threes, now you have the bell curve of 99%. So you can hit everybody in the middle, everybody to the 1, and everybody to the 2. And it's the same thing with loading here. So daily progressions or weekly, classic right here as we showed, but also think about your weekly structure. Maybe first week of your session is a little bit more volume, set the tone, disrupt the tissues. Brandon talked about that, more eccentric work. Week 2 is now more of your base strength work, right? So now you're getting into those sets of 3 and 5 and 6. And then maybe week 3, all right, is a little bit more of your power or max strength work. Or, God, when you know the rules, you can break them. What if we just took that reload before we actually needed a test? And we wrote what was called a performance cycle. So it's hard, it's harder, I'm resting, and then now I have maximized my, hopefully, body's ability to restore and rejuvenate itself so that that week 4 program, if I'm on a week 4 card, I'm good to go. So instead of just writing your typical ramp up and then down, what if you went down? Then you can go back up. Look at the daily focus in your cards and program, especially if you're working with adults, right? If it's a whiteboard workout and you change it up every day, I'm going to challenge you to add a little bit more structure. So maybe there's a daily change or maybe there's a weekly change right there, okay? So that's it for undulation, right? We're changing up in that. How many of you have heard of or done APRE with your clients? All right, this is great because you're going to learn it. APRE, auto-regulatory progressive resistant exercise, also known as, I don't recommend you doing this 4 days a week. It's also known, you're pretty much maxing out all the time. Who would this be really good for? Kids, clients who have never lifted. Who is this not good for? Professional athletes. Here's why. All right, so when we look at APRE, you're essentially, let's go back to that color chart, you're essentially in the red all time. But what's great about APRE is you're adjusting in real time. So you write your program, all right? Dante, I wrote him out. He's got to do 300 for 5. But I watched 275 and I'm like, ooh, he snuck a little helium in those plates. Those things are flying. You know what? I'm going to change this. Or I'm going to watch 300 and I'm going to see what he's got left. And then I can do a rep set cutoff and see if the iron's hot, we're striking. But you also got to be able to read the room. And when you look at a weight that normally should be light and they're just getting stapled and buried, then you're like, I got to make that change. So what's great about APRE is you're essentially building in testing sets. This is why, like in our general programming, we don't have max out days. We can't afford the time wasted on spending 30 minutes on a hex bar deadlift. We're building in, so you can call them performance sets, plus sets. I call them money sets because it's time to get paid, right? They've been putting the deposits in. They see that dollar sign on the card. They're like, Coach, I'm like, yeah, you know what it is, okay? Let's go. Let's take out that withdrawal. And then I can use that to write my next cycles accordingly, all right? So what's interesting, though, about 1RMs is it's going to change. I can hit my best number ever, and I can write and my programs off that number, and then in 3 days, I may not be able to hit that ever again, all right? RMs, especially ones, they can vary 10, 20. I've seen research up to 30%. You got a 600-pound deadlift, ooh, that's off by what? It could be up to 180 pounds. And if you're not flexible in your programming to look at that, you're going to get somebody hurt. So if I have a normal 1RM, well, let's call it 100 kilos on any exercise, all right? So for the Americans in the group, that's 220 pounds, all right? Super easy hack if you don't know it. Going from kilos to pounds, super easy. You double the kilos, add the first 2 digits. Let's try it. 100 kilos, double it, you get what? Add the 2 and the 0, you get what? Genius, right? Let's try it again. 150. 150 times 2 is what? Add the 3 and the 0. 330. All right, kilos to pounds, good luck. That one's a tough one, all right? So when you're buying bumper plates for your facilities, those reds always throw me off. Just buy them in pounds, okay? I know we try to be different, the rest of the world, but you know what? We're America, so it's fine, okay? But it's gonna change. It's gonna change. So you can't be locked in. I'm standing up here reminding you, have a good idea and a good gauge on where your training numbers are, but you can't be married to it. It can't be the only thing. So in APRE, again, you got a copy of this in your QR code. Again, you can write these in cycles as well. Higher volume, we're thinking more hypertrophy. Strength, we're doing more strength, okay? And then APRE3, max strength and power. But here's what it is. I'm gonna call your attention to the first two sets. You can look at 10, 6, or 3. You're doing your first two as prescribed. So whatever the percentage is. So 50% for 10, super light. I go to my next one, then I do 75 for 10. Whoa, yep, that's pretty much it. I hit my 10 RM, now I have ranges. What I recommend, 3 sets only. I talked with Dr. Brian Mann, who kind of came up with this many years ago, right? They were working with elite level powerlifters. Imagine maxing out. You went the hardest. Who did the half-mile airdyne challenge or perform better? Anybody? All right. Did you do it again right after that? Yeah. So when you max out, just cool it, right? But in the traditional system, again, if you're working with untrained clients, do it once. Based on how many reps you get on that third set, will dictate how much weight to take off or add. Everybody see that? Okay. So in your higher volume phases, early off seasons or introductory programs, you can explore this, right? You're always going to leave a couple of reps left in the tank. That's okay. 6, we get a little bit heavier, but this is the key, right? And you can print this out, laminate it, right? This is actually used a lot in high school settings because you're working with kids with very low training ages. All right, their numbers aren't going to make sense, but if I start noticing trends, I keep putting weight on the bar that's too light, then I'm wasting my time, okay? This is how it would look on a card. Again, when you scan that QR code, just change that number up there, okay? APRE. So now let's get into some cluster training. Some of you have experimented with this. Clusters I have done so much more with, the more I realize how important when we're trying to play these like Jedi mind games on our kids with speed of movement is intentional movement, okay? Here's a contradictory thought I want you to think about. And in GPS settings, if you're in the college setting where you have monitors, everything's about max speed, right? How fast did they run? How fast did they go? But when we look at velocities, we still tend to look at average velocities and not so much peak. Think about when that weight gets heavy. You've all done it. I'll be the first one to tell you. You put on a heavier set on your client. You want them to do 5 reps. They did 3. You really want to call it, but they're like, no, coach, I got one more. And then you're like, okay. And then you just turn around because you don't want to look at it, right? Agree, right? Or I make sure my interns grab those guys because I'm like, what are you doing? What do you want to happen? He said he could do it. I'm like, 3 was good. So if I do a set of 5 and you know 3 is good, what's 4 going to look like? What's 5 looking like? 6 is looking like they're on the ground, right? It's not going to happen. So with cluster training, we keep the focus. We keep the main thing on the main thing. Speed of movement, great technique. So instead of doing that grinding set for 4, 5, 6 reps, just break it up. When I work with athletes, I say, hell, you don't have to go 100 yards. All right, you don't have to play a 20-minute half, right? I'm working with a competitor right now for Strongest Man on Earth. One of the big reframes we're talking about right now, they compete today, is don't worry about the outcome. Worry about the event. And within the event, you worry about the rep. And so with cluster training, we put deliberate focus on strategic rest times so that I can still move that heavy weight extremely fast. And then I get some very unique neurological effects that we'll dig into in a bit, okay? So cluster, all we're doing is just adding short intervals between reps. Take your set of 3, take your set of 5, take your set of 8, break them up into mini sets, all right? Some people might call this, if you're from the bodybuilding literature, this might be a form of rest pause training. Do more clusters. Hot take, don't save clusters for heavyweights only. Okay, motor learning will remind us that we need lots of reps to grease the groove, right? So what do we see in traditional literature? Sets of 8, sets of 10, sets of 12. The same rule applies when you're working with new clients. You hit a set of 8, that's probably good, let's shut it down. Instead of a set of 12, make that 12 sets of 2. Make that 8 sets of 3. Now I get better technical expertise, I get better opportunity to coach, and I don't have to worry about turning my back when it gets a little ugly. I take pride in that work. I do a lot of cluster work with our return to play kids. They can't handle 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps without some sort of lateral shift, without some sort of neurological or physical pain. And so that's one of the trademarks that we use in our rehab process is at what point during that set is the pain getting exacerbated? When are you feeling that? Right, I'm good until about set 5. Okay, great. Then we're going to cluster them into sets of 5 to still get our volume load to make sure that we can get you back to play. So traditional, I do a set of 6, 6, 6. Then I just break this up accordingly, all right? So bunch of fancy stuff right here. I reduce fatigue. I maintain technique. Volume intensity is still higher. I reduce metabolic accumulation, right? Brandon talked about it's not the lactate, it's the hydrogen ions, right? You're making sure that those last couple reps are technically sound. Do more clusters, folks, right? I'm not here to talk about climate change and global change, but clusters will change the world, okay? Do a much better job of getting the great volume in and just shortening the rest so they get crisp, clean reps, okay? So here are some examples on this one. Traditional sets, again, if I did 2 sets of 4, this is a traditional. I take 3 minutes off, I do another set of 4. Hey, that'll work. If you're in a plateau, you're getting an athlete or a client that wants to achieve higher weights at faster speeds. Again, we're playing tricks on the mind. We're covering things like PAP, post-activation potentiation, but there's an E to the end of that as well, and that's enhancement. We'll get a lot of PAP or like a neurocharge, very short term, and if I extend the set, I get the PAP enhancement, so that'll last longer. And I'll talk a little bit more in a little bit. This is a little bit individualized. I might tell you wait 2 minutes in between sets, but if you wait 3 minutes, you might run faster or jump higher. These are all little things that you can add in your programming. You're just repackaging it. Number 2, I do a set, take 30 seconds, do another set, 30 seconds, so forth. So I do 2 clusters of 4 here. I can do 2 reps, cluster it, do another set of 2. And this is all periodized. You can do this accordingly. I can redistribute the rest. So I do a set of 4, and now I take mini 10 seconds here. Or I do rest redistribution number 2, where I'm taking 20. So on an 8-rep model, you can split it up. You can slice it up a different whole bunch of ways. What I want you to remember here is don't get stuck in traditional 4 sets of 5, 3 sets of 8. As those weights climb, if you're training somebody that needs high levels of speed and power and intention, get your 8 reps, get your 6 reps. But if you want both, you're mixing both of them, start taking advantage of those clusters, okay? So a couple types, and we'll kind of explore these a little bit later depending on what the exhibit all has for us. So your standard ones, and this is what I love. I love the art and science of programming. You read it, and as I said earlier, once you know the rules, you can break them. So stable clusters are what you keep a weight, and you just flat load it. 100 kilos, I'm gonna stay here, I'm gonna cluster this for 3 to 5 reps, cool. Number 2, undulating. Go up the pyramid. So now I get some warm-up sets in, I hit my peak weight, so I'm built up, I feel good. Now, if I'm working with an athlete in season, now I descend that because I want them not just feeling strong, but also what? Feeling what? Fast. So we'll do, and there's research on this, on the ramping down. You remember your last set, okay? And I explored this, and as a sidebar really quick, if you have a heavier day in the weight room, how many of us love squatting heavy, benching heavy, pressing heavy, emptying the tank, and then you got a whole bunch of auxiliaries left to do? How many of us love doing those C blocks? Love it, right? I started working with the older athlete because I became one. I started moving all that stuff to the front load. And we'll talk about pre-exhaustion in a little bit. So instead of waiting until I've got nothing left in the tank for my valid side leg curls, nothing left for my kettlebell bottoms up presses, I build that into our pre-work. And that way, when I'm done with the heavy stuff, I'm done. But you're gonna want, and in season, you're gonna want them feeling fast. Ascending, we just go up, and then I've got descending going down. And we'll talk about the PAP and PAPE. So again, same training, same types of levels of intensities and volumes, you're just flipping on how you deliver it. Reflect on your programs. If you're stuck in the 3-set model because of time, I get it. But if you've got some exploration and you can explore those edges, that's what I encourage, okay? How many remember this guy? Controversial figure. I'm bringing them all up today. But ahead of his time, okay? Charles Poliquin, Canadian descent. I think as Brandon said earlier, let's just say there was more than vitamin B shots, okay? But when I think about methods that people like Jake Tura, okay, and Renaissance periodization and Mike Israetel and all these fitfluencers that are talking about now, and that's why I had such a great time teaching my advanced class. And Bob Alejo, if you ever follow him on LinkedIn, if you want an old cranky guy to just tell you how it is, follow him, all right? Tell me what you call it now, and I'll tell you what we called it 20 years ago. Charles Poliquin was so ahead of his time, and unfortunately, we're finally realizing that now. So a couple things if you want to get really spicy. Going into kinesiology and biomechanics, all right, drop sets. typical normal drop sets, you do a weight, take some weight off, do more, take a weight, more. But the problem lies here is we're only looking at certain lever systems. We do this naturally with our teaching progressions. Any Olympic lifters in here? It's okay, you can raise your hands, it's safe. All right. So you've got a strict press, then you maybe go into a push press, and then maybe you go into a push jerk and split jerk. What we're really doing is essentially a mechanical drop set because now we're using different joint patterns or we're switching off different mechanics to make sure that I can still move that weight. So here's an example right here. Upper body push. How do I get to a position where if bench press, all right, well, I'll give you the example, okay? Maybe I start off with a high incline, so now I get a little bit more anterior delt, I get a little bit more shoulder work. I can only press so much with that. How do I make that a little bit harder? Or I do more weight, I drop the incline. Now I get a little bit more pec, I get a little bit more tricep. How do I drop set from there? Then I go into a flat bench. And then how do I finish it off? If you're working with that bro who's really working for that Chipotle burrito, okay, all of a sudden, here we go, let's rep it out on push-ups. But if I started off with push-ups, then I get a little pre-exhaustion, which is okay. So we call these elevator sets. I got this from Joe Ken, who I worked with a number of years. But think about the examples you can do mechanical drop sets, your landmine progressions, how you can affect your joint positions, one leg to two leg to one leg, eccentric to no eccentric. Instead of just writing your 12-week program for the season in 3 blocks of 4, add a little spice in there. Give them a sneak peek until next week, all right? So hurdle progressions, for instance. If I've got a really great athlete, I might look at, say, everybody set 1, whatever, snap down, hurdle jump, okay? I'm not gonna do that for 4 weeks. All right, set 2, snap, no snap down, just go right into the hurdle jump. Set 3, we're doing a repetitive hurdle jump. And I can layer that accordingly. You can do the same thing with mechanical drop sets here. So how, instead of taking 3 months to cover 3 exercises, how can you actually almost sprinkle it in, changing the reps and sets accordingly for those drop sets, okay? Another famous method, this one's kind of forgotten about a bit, is the 4-2 method. If you have somebody that really likes to push some weight and you want to add a little bit more eccentric work, get after it. 4 reps at a heavy weight, about 85 to 90, take a little bit of a rest, and then add that slow eccentric. So I know the field, at least in strength conditioning, we're big on accentuated eccentric training. We see weight releasers, all right, we have bands, we have chains, and we try to rip them off at the same time. Add a little bit more disruption to that, add a couple eccentric reps. Now, back to Brandon's argument in the talk before, I don't have to give up an entire 2 weeks of eccentric training, because you will be sore, right? If you're working with teams in the in-season and you tell coach, hey, we're gonna be a little sore for the next 2 weeks, they don't wanna hear that. We're here to support them. So the 4-2 method, 4 plus 2, you can make it a 4-4, add another short rest, so now you get a little bit more disruption there. Omni-contraction method, super fancy. All it means is what? All tempos of movement. We're doing concentric, we're doing eccentric. What's the third one? ISO. We'll talk a little bit more about ISOs in the hands-on. Big fan of overcoming and yielding ISOs. When you have no muscle change in the length, you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. But think about, do you always have to wait? Actually, let me time out. A lot of us teach eccentric first because we got to slow down the movement, right? How many of us have ever seen a client do a perfect goblet squat or bodyweight squat the first week with us? Does it happen? It happens, but it's pretty hard, right? So imagine working with a kid or a 40, 50, 60-year-old who hasn't really squatted besides the toilet in years. You're going to teach them a new movement, and you're going to say, but you're going to do it really, 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 really slow. But they're having a hard time getting to where you need them to go to. So in traditional triphasic training, they talk about eccentric first and iso, then concentric. You know what? In the private sector, in Gen Pop, teach the iso first. Get them in the proper body position. Get them to the end range position. Here's not a problem. Holding this is hard, but if they don't know where their target is, how are you going to expect them to go there really, really, really slow? Again, another impulse in training, change up the order that you do. So a method I really like, we call this a 3-week regime wave. You do an isodynamic, maybe for week 1 or set 1, then you do eccentrics only, and then you do your normal tempo. What does this look like? Try a set, put this in as a finisher. Do your rep, give me a 10-second hold, do another rep. And then you do a descending pyramid accordingly, drop it by 2. Because if we go to Charlie Poliquin's original time under tension research, what do they say? They talk about, man, to create muscle size and disruption in the tissue, You need a lot of time under tension, right? Your muscles are always under tension, but try a drop set here. So this is your, what I call isodynamic. It's also really good for return to play and rehab. I'm doing some isodynamic work right now because I've got some scap dysfunction. So yeah, we're pausing and we're going down, but I'm going to change how long I hold for and how long I contract for. Week 2, maybe you do eccentrics for all of them. Week 3 or set 3, then you go into normal tempo. Again, so you see how we're just kind of sprinkling in what we would normally see in a whole off season. I can do this in a workout in itself, okay? I talked a little bit about pre and post exhaustion. We're almost there, folks. We're going to have complexes and contrasts, and then we're done. Pre-exhaustion, one of the greatest inventions for the older athlete. You have an athlete that likes to lift heavy weight. You're a little unsure about their technique. All right, we're going to make sure that you're in a position where I don't have to worry about you getting as hurt. I want to fatigue your stabilizers. Here's my issue with saving all of your rehab, your prehab work towards the end. After I've benched, after I've inclined, after I've rowed, do your clients and athletes have the ability to really, really isolate that lower middle trap? Can they do it? No. CNS, right? We have synergistic dominance. It's very hard to shut off all the big stuff and say, lock in, right? My 13-year-old, yeah, Dad, you better lock it up, all right? Like, he's all over me. Lock in, just like attention span. So when you move this stuff to the beginning, especially, and again, I don't want to generalize, right? But when you're working with male teenage athletes, they don't give a damn about the technique, right? As soon as that shirt comes off, and I'm like, you put that shirt right back on, right? We don't do that here. But at high school, and at high school, all right? And I like to say private sector, I was getting upset because my high school kids were leaving, but I get it because it's a free program at the high school, right? We're like a club level program, right? You want to get better. You want to actually get coached, right? You pay money to get better. You want to go to the Parks and Rec program because it's free? Go for it. That's fine, but we're different here. But when we're doing this, I might throw in those push-ups. I might throw in those tricep push-downs. Find different ways. Try to do your back work before you do your bench work, right? Try to do your hamstring work before you do your squat work. Kids may not like it, but they also don't know any better, right? We leg curl, we hip switch, we hip lift. We do all that before we squat. Because again, we understand reciprocal inhibition. We want to make sure things are relaxing and contracting. So pre-exhaust, do the little stuff first. Post-exhaust, that's what we traditionally do. You do it right after that, okay? We've done a pretty good job with that. 6-12-24, yeah, good luck with this one. I won't release the name, Tim Karen, but he made us do this. This was an adaptation of Charlie Poliquin. We did 5-10-20s. 6-12-24 is kind of like that crock pot method. You get a little bit of strength, you get a little bit of size and muscular endurance, and then it's kind of like a, let's see what you got, okay? We'll throw these in variations of this in like our monthly challenges with our members, but essentially ground-based work here, moderate weight, now you're doing an assistance, and then a little bit of an isolation, okay? Team lift, what you're doing here, I gave you some percentages here, but again, like I said earlier, from a physiological standpoint, lock in, let's recruit those high threshold motor units. This is heavy and it's hard. Now I'm gonna make it a little bit lighter, but when you get to that level, right? And in physiology, we call this the Henneman principle. When you get to a high level of speed and tension, those big muscle fibers are getting recruited. Let's wax them right from the get-go. But now you gotta come back and you gotta keep going, right? Round 1's over. Round 2, you gotta dig in. Round 3, let's see what you got. So again, I wouldn't do this like Tim made us do, 3 sets on back squat. I would change that a lot to something a little bit more biomechanically advantageous, right? You're feeling spicy, I recommend it. Tag me on Instagram, I'll block you, okay? Complex, contrast sets. This is the fun stuff. We'll talk about this later in the hands-on. PAP, all right? We are getting a lot of neurological signaling. We're talking about rate coding. We're talking about how fast impulses from the brain can go to the muscle. We're capturing all of this awesome stuff that, frankly, for a long time, I didn't understand. Well, how come when I squat and then I did a jump, I actually jumped higher? I don't know. Now, and then I got a PhD and realized I should probably know this if I'm teaching it, right? So when we're looking at this, that's what we're doing. We're getting high threshold motor units. We're increasing the availability and excitability, right? I got the attention span of my motor neurons. And then, all right, muscular contraction, actin and myosin, we're strengthening that link and we'll be having things that are becoming a little bit more receptive to the signals. I just tell the kids, man, we're doing Jedi mind tricks on you. All right, I get you to think you can't move fast, but what it does is it just hits a spark and then you're actually able to jump higher and run faster. And it works. Problem I see with younger coaches and trainers, they rely on this too much. And just like anything else, it's like recovery. If all you do is the ice bath will work until it what? Doesn't, right? I got some BFR cuffs, going through some rehab. I wear them around all day. I'm gonna wear them around on campus. My PT's like, I wouldn't recommend that. I was like, why? Because they won't work? I was like, they're gonna work, right? But like, if that's all you use, you lose the effect of it, just like regular training. So with the PAP here, be strategic. You know, maybe these are like 2 to 6 week blocks and you're peaking, all right? But you can have a really good time here with that. So I call these speed strength, and I call them bi-complex, bi for 2. You'll read about it some other. Speed strength, you're priming the muscular system with a nervous system exercise. All you're really doing is doing something fast and then something for strength. Okay, that's all we're doing here. So I might jump before I squat. I might med ball rotational throw before I do a landmine rotational punch. I do the punch before a bench. Think about in your complexes, if you don't, and this is great, if you don't have time or space for your own plyo or power block, just complex it together, okay? So that's a speed strength, your strength speed. Now, this is what we normally see in literature. Now you're priming the nervous system for fast contraction with that loaded movement, okay? Squat, then vertical jump. Bench with a med ball lunge, RFE split squats. All right, good old reliable, right? I tell the kids, hey, show me your program. And I look at it, rear foot elevated, front rack Bulgarians. I was like, your coach must hate you, okay? You want to make your clients feel bad about themselves? Those, okay? But be careful with those. A lot of muscular damage, a lot of range of motion, okay? Hex bar deadlift with squat jumps, okay? And then the last area, this has been all the rage. There's been some speculation. Is it really as effective as it once was? If you read Triphasic 2, which I highly recommend, it kind of disrupts that. Maybe it's not as efficient as we once thought. But this is great. We still get, again, back to the premise of the talk, good results from this. But now how do we turn that good into great? French contrast, we'll do a little bit of this later on. Now I'm combining both methods. I get contrast work, heavy and light, and I get complex work, strength and speed. French contrast 4, Cal gets a lot of credit for this. It actually comes from a French track and field coach, Gilles Cometti. And what you're doing here is you're doing a heavy movement, and then a few seconds later, now we're doing a force-oriented plyo, so like a loaded kettlebell squat jump. If you have machines, maybe like a Kaiser jump. Then I get into a body weight or accelerated plyo, and then I move all this through and in a circuit. Now this takes time, this takes space, but it flipping works. And if you've got an athlete or client that is trying to get a little bit stronger, but mostly a little bit faster and a little bit more powerful, you throw this in for a little mini block towards the end of your programming, and they're gonna think you are the world's greatest coach, because you are. Because you're here today, you chose me over all the other people over there, and I appreciate that. And you better do it again this afternoon, because I remember every single one of you. Yeah, you've been smiling at me all day, man. I see you, all right? I'll talk to you later, okay? We'll talk about contrast methods. If your mind is blown and you didn't come from an exercise science degree, I got you, okay? Scan the QR code one more time. You get the programming sheets, my Instagram, my email's up there. I'm not going anywhere. If for some reason you go past Worcester and get lost, stop by and see me in Wilbraham. I appreciate you. Take care.